Trevor McShane here. Very happy to have another episode of Tune In with Trevor, and today we have Mr. Val Garay, legendary, and I mean it, legendary producer, engineer, talent overall. Great to have you. Thank you. What do you do as a producer?
Babysit. It's a guidance thing. It's a trust thing. It's a lot of patience and understanding thing. And of course, it's musical, and it's a lot of things rolled into one.
How did you get into becoming a record producer?
I started playing in bands in the 60s, and I did that for almost 10 years. And I got tired of having to depend on 3 or 4 or 5 other people for my livelihood. And so I decided to try something in the business, which I loved, but not something that would, require me to be part of a group of people. And I was very fortunate to be working in a studio in Hollywood called the Sound Factory, which was owned and operated by a very famous engineer named Dave Hassinger, who did all the early Rolling Stones hits, Satisfaction, Under My Thumb, all those things that everybody thought were done in England were actually recorded by him and mixed by him at RCA Studios in Hollywood.
You went to Stanford undergraduate, right?
Yeah.
And then where did you go?
I got in a band and...
No. You were in medical school.
Oh, yes. Yeah, well, yes. I did 4 years at Stanford and then 2 years of undergrad. 4 years of undergrad, 2 years of graduate school.
And you just were compelled to leave and go do music?
Well, I was always doing music on the side. My father was a singer and an actor his whole life, very successful guy. My uncle was a guitar player, not successful at all, but always had a trio that played all over the Bay Area for 50 years. And he taught me how to play guitar when I was about 11 years old. And I was attracted to writing songs and playing music. And so I kind of kept that up all through my school days and college days. And the love of doing it never went away. So when I got, to a certain point in my life where I was kind of making life decisions, I was playing in bar bands, doing covers and that kind of stuff, which is how everybody starts out. And I was driving home one night from a gig down in Belmont, California, and I was on El Camino Real, and I was listening to the radio, and the Beatles' I Want to Hold Your Hand came on the radio, and I swear to God, I almost hit 3 parked cars, and I just pulled over, and I was just completely taken.
You've worked with some of the most powerful voices in music. When you first meet an artist in the studio, when and how often does it happen you go, this is really special?
Well, usually by the time you get in the studio, you already know. It's usually before that when the manager or the lawyer or whoever comes to you with the idea of you working with this artist, and they present you with either the person in person or demos or whatever, and you kind of start making that decision and trying to see if that's something that you could really make something out.
All right, you won a Grammy for Bette Davis Eyes. I'm sure you get asked about it all the time. Give us the background, the story. How did that happen? It was such a unique song.
I got a call from Jim Mazza, who was the head of EMI America at the time, and he said, I have this artist, Kim Carnes, and she's doing an album with this producer, but she's not happy with it. Would you be interested in finishing the record? So I said, sure. So she came over to Record One, and I worked on the album, and I mixed it. And the first song on it was a cover, which went to like number 5, called More Love. It was a big hit. So then after that, she asked me if I would produce her next record. And we were looking for songs, and Donna Weiss, who wrote Bette Davis Eyes with Jackie DeShannon, came to me and said, I have a great song for Kim's new album. I said, come over to record one. She came over and played it for Kim and I, and we both kind of looked at each other and went, And then she said, I have this other song that I played for Kim last year when she was working with this other producer, and she loved it and he loved it, but I wouldn't let them have it because he wanted all my publishing. I said, well, leave me the demo. So she left me the demo, which I should play for you because it sounded nothing like the record that I did. But I fell in love with the lyrics, and I knew that she wrote it with Jackie, and I'd known Jackie since the 60s, and I knew that Jackie was a folk singer as a songwriter as well. So I sat down with an acoustic guitar and started playing it slower and playing it like a folk song. And then I went to Bill Como, who was her keyboard guy, and I said, listen, create a riff for me that plays through the whole song. And he came up with that riff, and we cut it live, one take, boom.
Did you know when you cut it, oh my gosh, this is something?
I didn't really know at that time because I was so into what I was doing. We were doing this whole album and we were trying to do it live. So we'd already rehearsed for 3 weeks at Leeds Rehearsal Studios in North Hollywood. And what's interesting is the night we started rehearsing Bette Davis Eyes was the night John Lennon was murdered. So it's kind of weird coincidence. And also the fact that I won the Record of the Year and he was nominated for the Record of the Year that year. To answer your question, when I was there the next day, Kenny Rogers came over because he and Kim were good friends, and Lionel Richie was with him. And we played them Bette Davis Eyes because I'd done a rough mix that night. Thank God I did it to quarter-inch tape because that ended up being the record. I never could beat it. And I played it for them, and Lionel said, and I'll never forget this, he said, the only way that's not going to be a number one record is if Indian chanting goes big somewhere. And so I thought, maybe this is a big hit. And then about 2 weeks later, after the single got released, we were sitting in my office, Kim and I had a radio station on. I don't remember the station, but they played Bette Davis Eyes. And they said, call in and tell us what you think. So we called up and we got it answered on the call-in line. And we said, could you play that Bette Davis, Betty something song? And the guy goes, if I get one more request for that song, I'm never going to play it again.
Did you ever hear from Bette Davis?
Oh, yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah. We have letters and everything from her. She wrote a letter to Kim and I, and she basically said, I'm so grateful for what you guys did with my name and my likeness at this point, because we used her face kind of in the eyes shot. And she said, because I've now become a hero with my grandson.
How often has it happened that you have done a song and you go, this is a winner? And how often does it happen that you are disappointed?
Pretty much every song that I thought was a huge hit became a huge hit, except for one, which is a song I did with the Motels, which was the single after Only the Lonely. Was it after Only the Lonely? No. Yes, after Only the Lonely, we did a song on that album called Remember the Nights, which I thought was good.
Tell me, what are some of your biggest hits?
Bette Davis Eyes, You're No Good with Linda Ronstadt, When Will I Be Loved with Linda Ronstadt, Blue Bayou with Linda Ronstadt, Neil Diamond live at the Greek, Orleans, Still the One, Four Seasons, December 63, Oh What a Night, Jackson Browne, The Pretender. It's hard to think of them all. Andrew Gold, Lonely Boy.
So it must be thrilling for you to be working with this caliber of artists.
Well, you have to understand that at the time that I worked with these artists, they were all coming up just like I was. So it was that kind of a sense. It was like everybody was striving to be successful or be good at what they did. You didn't look at it in that respect. In retrospect, yeah, oh my God, the amount of James Taylor, Handyman, Up on the Roof, Her Town Tool, all the hits that I had with him. Neil Diamond, I did about 4 albums with him. The first hit was Desiree. I don't know, it's just...
How often does it happen that a session goes awry for whatever reason? There's personality clashes or the artist can't sing it the way you want to do it? I mean, how do you handle those? Does dissension happen or problems, and how do you get around them?
I haven't had any real dissension problems, but I have had problems where and I'll give you the great example. When I was starting Kim Carnes' record, the album that I was producing, and we'd rehearsed all these songs for 3 weeks, and we kind of wanted to do it like a live concept, which we did. She sang live with the trackers when they were tracking the records. And the Bette Davis Eyes is a live vocal, one take. The first song that we tried to record was called Here Comes the Bad One Again. And we tried recording this song for 2 days, till finally I said, next. But think about starting a project, and the first thing you try to record is a song that nobody gets or can get. And I was like, oh my God, is this thing going in the tank?
So tell me now, we all want to know, how do you make a hit record?
You find a great song, first and foremost, and then you find a great artist. And you marry them.
And how do you find your musicians? Where do they come from?
Well, all the guys that I worked with all those years, through all of those hit records, were all kind of guys that I grew up with in Hollywood, playing around nightclubs and, hanging out in the musical community in the 60s and hanging out at the bar at the Troubadour. And, you'd see Don Henley sitting here and Jackson Browne sitting there, and Russ Kunkel was sitting here talking to Leland, and all those people were just all part of the framework that you started with and grew up with. So
The the 70s and 80s were a great time for music and recordings and all the rest of that. Are they the halcyon days? Has it gotten better, worse since then?
Well, I always said to myself, don't ever say that you can't listen to that music because it just doesn't sound good anymore. So I always try to find the good in everything, and the music has changed drastically. It's gone from songs that have, a sense of story, a sense of musicality, to things that are very compact and repetitive. And so that period of time was fantastic for songwriting and singers and music, and it's gone, but it's morphed into something else. So when I was a kid and I was listening to O's, my mother was telling me, turn that noise off. I never wanted to get to that point in my lifetime where I felt that way. So I've always remained open to what's going on, and I've always loved technology, so I've never fallen behind in that respect. So, it was a pretty amazing period of time. I would say it was the pinnacle of music in those years.
Thoughts on the music industry today? It's certainly changed from branch distribution, as they say, and now it's turned into a social media kind of a business of sorts.
Yeah, well, if you think back and you remember this as I do, when you were buying vinyl records and then CDs came out, it was a revelation. In fact, even before that, when you were buying vinyl records and the ability to duplicate things, which is cassettes, came out, and then the real ability to duplicate, which was CDs, and then when you got to the internet, the whole thing changed dramatically, because then everything was instantaneous and easily presentable to the world. It may not have meant anything, but sometimes it does. And that's what changed the music business.
What kind of, who are your musical heroes?
Cole Porter is one of them. I've always loved, my aunt was his personal secretary for 35 years. So I got to meet him when I was a kid and go to the house in Bel Air, and I used to talk to him because I was a guitar player and I loved writing songs, and I always used to ask him, he'd walk around the house and he'd go, Moon, Spoon, June. He'd go, kid, what rhymes with spoon, He'd say things like that. It was funny. He always had this little dog in his arm. Another one of my musical heroes was Ray Charles.
Okay.
I remember listening to What I Say in that whole album, and also the amazing record he did that was all country songs that were basically giving you the subtle difference between country and R&B, because he made an R&B record out of I Can't Stop Loving You and songs like that. So I fell in love with that in my teens.
Are you as turned on today about making music as you were when you started out?
Yeah.
And do you listen to everything?
Yes, I
all
do.
the genres?
Oh, yeah.
And to keep up with the technology, you must. You're an engineer. Do you engineer your own stuff?
Everything. I have 100 plus gold and platinum records, and every single one I recorded and mixed myself. I only had one song remixed without me there, and that's because I was in England working, and Neil Diamond needed to put the song out right away. So he got Frank Filippetti, which is not a bad substitute, in New York to mix it. But other than that, I mixed every hit Linda had, every hit James I did, all the Kim Carnes, all the Motels, every record that I made, I recorded and mixed.
You mentioned that you worked with the Four Seasons, Bob Gaudio, and
Frankie.
what was that like?
Did you ever go to Martoni's?
I did.
Okay, well, you could promote a record in the bar at Martoni's better than any place in America. And I was working with the Four Seasons, and right around the corner was the Sound Factory where I worked. And we always used to call Martoni's up and order food, and we'd have to send a runner over to pick it up. And so, and sometimes we didn't have a runner, so we couldn't order food. And so Frankie was there, and he says, let's order some food from Martoni's. And I said, well, we don't have a runner tonight, and they won't bring it over. And he says, wait a minute. So he picks up the phone, he calls Martoni's, he goes, Sal, it's Frankie Valli. We want ba-dum. 15 minutes later, 3 guys with these big trays come rolling through the front door. And from that day on, we could order from Martoni's.
But, I mean, Bob Gaudio he wrote
A lot of hits.
a lot of hits. He's a genius, isn't he?
Yeah. He's a crazy, crazy great guy. I love Bob Gaudio. I used to call him Gaudio Audio.
And you're still having a marvelous time, right?
I'm having the time of my life still.
Well, that about does it. If you haven't already, join the Trevolution by liking, subscribing, commenting on Tune In with Trevor. And we will see you next time.